Your hands are shaking and you do not know why. Not in the way hands shake from cold or caffeine or exhaustion. This is a trembling from inside the architecture, a vibration that belongs to a year that no longer exists on the calendar, responding to something in this room, this hallway, this particular quality of afternoon light coming through a window, as though some part of you never left that place at all. Your thinking mind looks down at your own hands and cannot account for them. You have already processed what happened. You have spoken the words out loud in rooms designed for that purpose. You have assembled the narrative. And yet here is your body, running a protocol your conscious mind did not authorize. Responding to a signal your prefrontal cortex swears. It has already resolved. This is not a malfunction. This is not you failing to move past something. This is one of the most sophisticated information storage mechanisms in the known universe doing exactly what it evolved to do. And the tragedy is not that it happens. The tragedy is that almost nobody ever explains what it is. Richard Feynman spent his career being irritated by bad explanations. He had a particular contempt for what he called knowing the name of something without knowing the thing itself. You could tell him a hummingbird wing beat 43 times per second, and he would look at you and say, "But do you know what that means? Do you understand what is actually happening in the air?" Knowing the label is not the same as understanding the mechanism, and the mechanism is where everything lives. The mechanism behind what your body does with trauma, the real mechanism, is one of the most counterintuitive findings in the last half-century of neuroscience. And it starts with the fact that most people never actually learn about memory. Memory is not one thing. This sounds simple. The implications are not. When people say they remember what happened, they remember the accident, the last conversation, the moment they found out. They are describing one specific kind of memory. Explicit, declarative memory. The kind that carries a timestamp. The kind you can narrate. The kind that runs through the hippocampus. That curved structure deep in the temporal lobe that acts as the brain's indexing system. Taking experience, filing it, tagging it with context and making it retrievable as story. But there is another kind of memory entirely. This one does not run through the hippocampus. This one carries no timestamp. It does not arrive as a scene or a face or a narrative. It arrives as sensation, a specific quality of dread with no object. The inexplicable impulse to leave a room or to go very still, or to stop breathing for a moment, in a way you cannot explain when someone later asks what was wrong. This is implicit memory, and it is stored in a completely different part of the brain, following a completely different logic, governed by rules that have nothing to do with conscious narrative and everything to do with survival. Here is what actually happens in the nervous system when something unbearable occurs. The amygdala, two almond-shaped clusters of neurons at the base of the temporal lobe, detects threat before conscious perception. Before the thinking brain has registered what it is seeing, before language has assembled itself into a description, the amygdala has already fired. Cortisol, adrenaline, the autonomic nervous system shifting into its emergency configuration. Heart rate accelerating. Blood moving toward the large muscles. The visual field narrowing. And in that state, in the neurochemical environment produced by extreme stress, the hippocampus goes partially offline. This is measurable. Elevated cortisol and norepinephrine at trauma levels literally suppress hippocampal encoding, the mechanism by which experiences get stamped with a time and place index, by which they get narrativized and filed as past events. That mechanism is chemically inhibited precisely when the most overwhelming things happen to us. What this means in the most direct language available is this. The traumatic experience does not get stored as a story, it gets stored as a state. The amygdala encodes it without coordinates, without a timestamp, without the contextual information that would tell the brain, this was then, this was there, this is now over. The body learns the shape of the threat at the level of sensation and response, and that learning becomes a reflex, not a memory, something that does not require recall, because it never required consciousness in the first place. This is why the body responds to something the mind cannot remember, why the grief response fires in the absence of a clear trigger, why the nervous system can mobilize full emergency resources in response to an afternoon light that resembles a specific October. The body is not confused. The body is pattern matching. A sensory signature that shares enough features with the original threat activates the stored protocol. And here is where Feynman becomes essential. Not as a symbol, as a physicist. Feynman described what he called the principle of least action, the observation that physical systems, given multiple possible paths between two states, always take the path that minimizes the action integral across the entire trajectory. Nature is economical. Not lazy, economical. There is a difference. The nervous system operates on a version of this principle. When a pattern of sensation is first encountered alongside an overwhelming threat, the brain takes the path of least action. It encodes the response at the most efficient level possible, not at the level of conscious narrative, which is metabolically expensive and requires a functioning hippocampus, at the level of automatic response, which requires nothing from the thinking brain at all. A conditioned reflex is not a primitive failure of cognition. It is the nervous system finding the minimum energy path through a complex system. The body stores trauma at the level of automatic response because at the moment of the trauma, that was the most efficient encoding available. And efficiency, once established in a biological system, does not automatically revise itself when the threat is gone. The path remains worn. The reflex remains active. Not because the body is broken, because the body is doing exactly what bodies were built over millions of years to do. If you are watching this video, something in the title found you. It means something your body is carrying right now cannot be fully named. It means you have probably already done the cognitive work, the talking, the processing, the narrative. And something in you knows the narrative is not enough, that there is a level at which the body has not yet received the information the mind has accepted. What Feynman knew about grief is the complete framework for this. It is only available while this video is running. The link is in the description because the next part gets stranger. And more important, there is a nerve in the human body that connects the brain to almost every major organ: heart, lungs, liver, stomach, intestines. The vagus nerve, from the Latin word for wandering, it wanders from the brainstem through the neck, branching into the chest, into the abdomen, touching almost everything along the way. It carries information in two directions. And, this is what most people do not know, approximately 80% of its fibers travel upward, from the organs to the brain. The body is constantly sending information to the brain, not the other way around. The psychiatrist Stephen Porges spent decades mapping what he called the polyvagal system, the hierarchy of autonomic responses organized around vagal pathways. The nervous system, he found, does not operate as a simple on-off switch between calm and threat. It operates as a three-level hierarchy. The first level is what Porges calls ventral vagal, the social engagement system. The face is open, the voice is modulated, the body is in a state of safe and connected. This is not the absence of threat. It is an active state maintained by ongoing neural regulation. The second level is sympathetic activation, the mobilization state. Heart rate accelerating, muscles priming, the classic fight or flight configuration. The third level, the one that does not get discussed nearly enough, is dorsal vagal shutdown, ancient, pre-mammalian, the freeze response. When the threat is so overwhelming, so inescapable that neither fight nor flight is possible, the nervous system drops into immobilization. The body goes still, not because it has decided anything, because this is the oldest survival program available. Become invisible, become small, become something not worth pursuing. This state can be stored. This autonomic configuration can become the body's default setting after something unendurable. Not because the person has failed to process, because the nervous system encoded the pattern at the level of automatic regulation, and that encoding persists long after the event that caused it has ended. Van der Kolk's 4 words, "The body keeps the score," are a metaphor. The mechanism is deeper than the metaphor reaches. The body does not merely keep score. The body is the archive. The body is the medium in which the inscription was made, written not in words but in the language of sensation, tension and release, contraction and expansion, breath and its arrest, the 1,000 small adjustments of muscle tone and posture that constitute what it feels like to be alive in a nervous system that learns something it has not yet been given permission to forget. If what we have just covered is landing somewhere specific in your body right now, somewhere below thought. The full architecture is in what Feynman knew about grief. Only available while this video is up. The link is in the description. Go get it, then come back. There is a particular kind of person who can sit with this. Feynman was that kind of person. In the months and years after Arlene died in that Albuquerque sanatorium, he wrote about seeing a dress in a shop window and finding himself at the edge of disintegration. He wrote about how a particular song could reach somewhere below thought, below analysis, below all the physics he could bring to bear on any other problem in the universe. He did not pathologize this, he observed it. He turned his scientist attention toward the question of why the body responds to something the mind has already processed and asked, what is actually happening here? That question, what is actually happening here, is the question this channel exists to pursue. What the neuroscience actually says, not the pop psychology version. The data is this. When a person with stored implicit trauma brings conscious attention to the raw physical sensation of the stored state, without trying to change it, without narrating it, without analyzing it, but simply remaining present with the sensation itself, the neural encoding begins to update. This process, which researchers call interoceptive awareness, is not therapy. It is a fundamental property of the nervous system. Memory is not static. Every time an implicit memory is activated and held in conscious awareness, without the survival response completing into behavior, the memory becomes briefly labile, briefly open to modification. The neuroscience term is memory reconsolidation, and it happens not at the level of story, but at the level of sensation. Not when you tell the narrative again, but when you feel the body state and stay present inside it, bringing the attentional capacity of the prefrontal cortex to a system that was originally encoded without it. Feynman wrote in his notebooks, "I would rather have questions that cannot be answered than answers that cannot be questioned." The body carries unquestioned answers. It carries the conclusion that this is dangerous, encoded without debate, registered as certainty at the level of reflex. What the nervous system is waiting for, what reconsolidation research suggests it is waiting for, is not resolution. It is questioning, not the thinking mind arguing against the body's encoded conclusion, but present moment experience that offers different evidence at the level where the original encoding occurred. That is the mechanism. That is what Feynman, if he had this language, would have called the actual physics, not the metaphysics, not the mythology, not the narrative, but the actual causal sequence that produces the outcome. The body stored the trauma without coordinates because the hippocampus was offline at the moment of encoding. The amygdala filed the pattern as a reflex rather than a memory. The polyvagal system learned a configuration that was once necessary and is now simply persistent. And the path back, if that word means anything, is not through the narrative. It is through the sensation, through the body's own data, attended to with precision, without the demand that it produce something other than what it is. What Feynman knew about grief is the complete framework built around this understanding. Not self-help, not a guide, a map of the actual mechanisms. It is only available while this video is running, and the link is in the description. If you are somewhere in the middle of what this video is describing, that framework was built specifically for this moment. There is one more thing to say. It is the hardest thing. The body stores trauma not because something went wrong. The body stores trauma because something went right. The amygdala's ability to encode without the hippocampus, to file a survival protocol without requiring conscious participation, to run the response faster than thought. This is not a design flaw. This is the design. This is what made it possible for your ancestors to survive things that should not have been survived. The tragedy is not that the body stores what overwhelmed it. The tragedy is that the same mechanism that once saved a life continues to fire in contexts where the original threat is gone, and the body does not know the difference. Not because the body is confused, because the body is loyal. Because the body is still, at some level, trying to protect you from the thing that once almost broke you. The body stores the trauma it cannot remember because it was built to survive first and understand later. Understanding, when it comes, does not arrive as narrative. It comes as the body's own evidence, gathered slowly, held carefully, attended to with the kind of precision that Feynman spent his whole life insisting was the only thing that actually mattered. There is a photograph of Feynman taken late in his life. After the diagnoses, when the physics was still going, but the body was beginning to close, he's looking at something off camera. The expression on his face is not resignation, not performed serenity, not the composure of a man who has accepted his condition. It is curiosity. The expression of someone who is still, even at the edge of everything, interested in what is actually happening. The body that cannot remember the trauma it is carrying is still looking at something off camera, still responding to a frequency that predates the mind's current understanding of its own history, still running the protocol, still loyal to the survival event that shaped it. The question Feynman would ask, the only question with any traction, is not why has this not stopped yet? The question is, what is it exactly? What is actually happening here? In the tissue, in the nerve, in the oldest part of the autonomic architecture? Right now. What is it exactly? And you sit with that question, not trying to answer it, holding it at the edge of sensation, the way Feynman held every problem that would not yield, with patience, with precision, and with the strange, specific kind of respect you owe to something real. Before this video ends, which is now, what Feynman knew about grief. Only while this video's up, the link is in the description. The complete map. Get it now.